Okay there. Hi there. We all have aspirations, and if I had a magic wand, this would be my place of work, perhaps, if only for a short-term period. Nevertheless, there are a lot better, more intelligent people than I who've stepped through that door, uh, and this is one of them. Okay. Now, before I start, anyone who hasn't should read Patrick Buchanan's The Unnecessary War. It's a great book, and it really talks about how we made the mistake of actually even entering into World War II. And I make that point because, God forbid, we might be making the same mistake if we start poking the bear with Russia. Okay? Now, typical. So, yes, I attended an event at 10 Downing Street, and I bumped into this chap here. Now, this guy is talking about having our sons and daughters prepare for war. Okay, he's got a rack of medals. None of them look like they've had combat, but that's neither here nor there. He's been placed in charge of the armed forces. I'm really sick and tired of people talking about the defense of the nation and coming up with imaginary bogeymen. And, Russia is not our enemy, number one. What I also want to say is, as we know, recruitment of the armed forces has declined over the years, over the last quarter of a century, significantly by 25%. I often say, where there's an anomaly, there is a bribe. And if we're going to point the fingers at where the anomaly is, it's got to be Capita, isn't it? Because they're responsible for the recruitment and they haven't done a good job. And each time they come out with some amazing type advertisement, it just falls flat on its face. We have a negative recruitment at the moment. More people are leaving than entering. And in some respects, good on them. Well done, Tommy Atkins, because who in their right mind ought to be and would be fighting for this country? We have the situation with Soldier F, where the government is still persecuting people for Operation Banner in Northern Ireland. Yeah, and then there's the recent one of SAS soldiers being sought for prosecution for events what happened in Afghanistan. And then we have this new legislation where they're focusing on boys and so-called misogyny, violence against women and children. Now, the reason why I mention that is because a couple of things I've noticed, and that is in the education, you have this situation where you have a lot of single motherhood. Okay, so it's a lot of single mothers are raising the boys who are then being accused of being misogynistic. So, what's going on there? They're being raised by women. Why are they turning out like this? Then when we look at the school system, it's predominantly women who are the teachers. And as Veda Kunti would say, teacher, don't teach me nonsense. So they're being raised by women in the school and educated by women, and yet still having this. Some people accusing figures such as Andrew Tate as taking the lead over where fathers would have taken it. But in all honesty, society does not paint fatherhood in a very positive light. What has this got to do with recruitment into the armed forces, you may ask? Well, there's, I suppose, a natural tendency for youth and boys in particular to do adventurous activities with elements of risk. And the armed forces have always been a magnet for that type of thing, where you're put to the test. But all these sort of qualities which have been labeled toxic masculinity have been derided and, frowned upon from that sort of what you call it, habitat, if you like, of a feminized school system who do not understand boys. And I've sort of seen it myself when I've spoken to teachers. When they see two boys fighting, for example, it's like, oh my God, they're fighting. And the women, they don't know how to handle it. With a guy, they would know how to handle it. So then you've got this like demasculinization of the masses. And it is Tommy Atkins who's the predominant soldier. As yet, we haven't had equality in regards to equal number of women and men in the armed forces, and that's not a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. But I digress. I want to take you back to the basis. So we're going to do a bit of map reading. So this is United States of America. This, as you see down the bottom here, is Cuba. And in 1962, when the Russians decided that they were going to collaborate with a friendly country and put nuclear weapons in Cuba, a sovereign country, for some reason, they saw this as the trigger, a potential trigger of World War III. America played out what is known as the Monroe Doctrine, whereby superpowers should be in control of their sphere of influence and power. And as you see on the map there, okay, other than Canada, friendly nation, and Mexico, subdued nation, okay, the Caribbean, okay, the threat from America is extremely minimal. This brought the threat to America on America's doorstep, and they were shaking in their boots. Funny enough, this is happening again. Soviet troops are speaking with Cuba at the moment, and plans are going to foot where technology is being given to Cuba. We'll go to another map now. Here we see Western Europe. And in Western Europe, this area here, which is Ireland, is a neutral country. It's neutral. What do you think would be the response? Obviously not the European Union, because Ireland is the member of the European Union, but Ireland is not a member of NATO. What do you think would be the response if Russia started having strong diplomatic and economic ties, maybe giving it a lot of cheap gas, etc., and started having an agreement with Ireland to put nuclear weapons in Ireland? Yeah. How do you think NATO would respond to that? And Ireland, a sovereign nation, making that decision. Do you think NATO would tolerate that? Not really. So let's come to the cause célèbre, because this is the situation in which Russia finds itself. After the 90s, 92, of the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, NATO has been progressively moving eastward towards Russia. And it's even now included Finland now on this. Yeah. So they're peering upon its border. And Ukraine, which has always been really a part of the Soviet Union to a certain degree, okay, is the last straw. Okay. And they've always said that this is Ukraine is Russia's sphere of influence. Yeah. And how much tied is it, Ukraine? Well, when we dig a little bit deeper, this is a map of the ethnic speakers and ethnic Russians in the Ukraine. And you will notice that in the Crimea, it is literally completely Russian. And then along the areas, it's all Russian. Okay, with elements here. So when we look on the map in terms of the conflict of Russia and Ukraine, you will notice that Russia has secured all the areas of the ethnic Russians in the Ukraine. This is what they're looking at. This is what they want. Yeah. And they're incorporating that. This war ends, as I said about 2-3 years ago, it ends with Russia keeping the ethnic Russian locations and areas, and then the rest of Ukraine being neutral, not joining NATO, not being a part of Russia, just a neutralized zone. This is how it's going to end. Now, if it happened 3 years ago, all well and good. Unfortunately, a lot of blood has been spilt to come to the conclusion. But when you look at the map and the fundamentals, you know that Russia is only interested in Ukraine. If we go back, Russia is not interested in the Western Europe. Has no interest in it. And even if it did, so what? What would actually happen? What would change in Europe for the man and woman on the omnibus? How would their life change? I doubt if they'd be forced to speak Russian. Okay? But I'll slightly digress. So, Professor Xing, who gave a very good lecture on how societies collapse, and what he's saying is that at first societies, they are quite open, liberal and dynamic. The people are fully on board and have the consent of the people. Criticism is welcome because it helps that that sort of Britpop sort of stuff, and unity. Think 1966. I remember it. Many of you won't. Yeah, but that whole thing about the nation together. Think of Concord. Yeah, that sort of sense of achievement as a nation. But then we have decline. This is what we've been seeing over the last quarter of a century. I'd say that happened slightly a bit before that within the Thatcher years. Yeah, where bureaucratic selling off the company assets through privatization. But recently, we have the deception which is creeping in, and this has been caused by economic shocks sort of bailing out the banks, and this push towards stability at any costs, but it's not good enough. The other element within this, as I mentioned before about the attacks, I've called it the 4 Fs: family, attack of the family, flag, faith, and the net result of this feminism, if you like, is lower birth rates within the family, and so you don't have a replacement level. Baby boomers was during a time of good, strong economic environment, so optimism was high. But the baby boomers now are the residue, and their generation were the generation that suffered in the 80s, etc., and also over the last sort of 30-40 years, where the economy hasn't been good, so there are less babies to prop up the baby boomer generation who are coming to retirement. So one of the government's ideas, brilliant plans, is to have a replacement in regards to immigration. Immigration is not bad. I'm a son of an immigrant, and I don't think immigration is too much of a problem as long as it's controlled. And more importantly, with immigration is integration, and the ideals of what Britishness is, and following those ideals and not changing it. But when we get to the collapse stage, this is where there's a system of shocks, and we're waiting for it at the moment. We're like an iceberg waiting for the next financial crash. But previous to that, governments become a lot more authoritarian. Think of Novid, what happened a few years ago. Can't call it by name even, because that will restrict so-called my number of viewers. But think about Novid, what happened some years back, and look at the overreach within the government of that, in terms of track and trace, and this very Orwellian sort of way of handling it, and the coercion of individuals having to take injections, etc. This is the stage we're at the moment. We're almost coming up towards the collapse, and when you have that, you have things like more authoritarian control, like digital ID. You have introduction of very strange laws, like looking at having facial recognition, lawfare against opponents. They're not so open to criticism. That's why I kind of mentioned what happened to us a few years back. Certain people, such as Tommy Robinson or Andrew Tate, become the establishment's bogeymen. Yeah. And then we remove things like trial by jury. Yeah. It's a perfect storm to have stupid wars. And that stupid war, obviously, is against Russia. Now, traditionally, this has been seen as physically, metaphorically, and literally a wall, a barrier, a natural barrier to invasion. Okay? Not anymore. Not anymore. Because we have a new invasion force coming over into the UK. And although we only have an army of 75,000, this year alone has seen an introduction and influx of, I think it's 45,000 people who have entered into this country by this method. Yeah, they've crossed the channel by this method, literally facilitated. Our government doesn't even, and no longer calls them illegal anymore, and have changed the name to the Orwellian newspeak of irregular. Yeah, how many people come to the UK irregularly? You mean illegally? Yeah, but we're not even calling it that because they've thrown their hands up and said, "Come over." And this is it. I mean, in 2022, we're looking at 45,000. In 2025, it's even more than that. Remember, this is post-Brexit, yeah, and still the numbers come. We are given, ghosted, gaslit as to how they come from imaginary sort of gangs, smuggling gangs, and they're paying fortunes to come over to the UK. Where they get that money to come over, I don't know. But the reality is they're being facilitated by NGOs like was it Calais, Peace for Calais, whatever, or Care for Calais, which is run, oddly enough, by a former Royal Marine. Yeah, and Mosley, a lady called Mosley, not related to Ian Mosley. But you can see that we're having a mass invasion into the country. And the breakdown of the people who are coming across the channel, what is interesting is that Britain never had any sort of like colonial presence really within these countries. So we're looking at sort of Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria, other nationalities including in there Somalia, Eritrea. And why they're coming into the UK and they're not integrating. Yeah, we're having the barber shops, sure thing. A lot of crime going around. The Deliveroo drivers, security guards. It's all happening under our watch, and the government is facilitating this. So we don't need to worry about Russians coming into the country. This is what we need to worry about. Because what is it they're bringing into the country? What would you rather do? Listen to a Russian opera? Or what these guys are bringing in? In Afghanistan, I think they even ban music. Yeah? And then we have this infiltration, a collaboration between the left and, you could say, Islamic extremism against the government, where for them, it's only acceptable, that's the only flag which they will find acceptable. Given that this is in the UK, not a single Union Jack you're seeing there. All right. To make matters worse, we have that collaboration with the police, with the two-tier policing, which they seem to be protecting it, literally protecting it, facilitating it. It's troubling. It's very troubling. But we don't need people joining the army, yeah, to protect our country, as we know, yeah, because these guys are doing a fantastic job. They're raising the colours. They're raising the colours, and they're also exposing the lies which we are being fed. This is what we ought to be doing, raising the colours and looking at our country, building our country up. That's it, really. That's all I've got to say. Over and out. Just a reflection.